The first note of my grandfather's lost symphony brought the dead canary back to life. I dropped the ancient manuscript, backing away as the small yellow bird, stuffed and motionless on my mantel for the past decade, suddenly ruffled its feathers and began to sing. My name is Dr. Eleanor Walsh, professor of musicology at Benton University, and until that moment, I had built my academic reputation on rational analysis and historical accuracy. Now I stood in my living room watching the impossible unfold, wondering if grief had finally broken my mind. 3 days earlier, I had received a package from Vienna. Inside was a water-damaged leather portfolio containing sheet music, the handwriting unmistakably my grandfather's. The accompanying letter from the Austrian National Library explained they discovered it during renovation work, hidden in a sealed compartment behind the rare manuscript collection. My grandfather, Julian Walsh, had been a brilliant but obscure composer who disappeared in Vienna in 1973 while researching what he called the transcendental properties of harmonic structures. The family had received cryptic postcards for several months afterward, then nothing. His body was never found. Growing up, I'd idolized him despite never having met him, following his footsteps into music theory and eventually building my career on analyzing his published compositions. The discovery of new material from him was professionally exciting, but I hadn't expected it to be personally terrifying. The manuscript was titled simply Resonance, with a subtitle in my grandfather's handwriting. When played, brings alignment between worlds. I had assumed it was metaphorical, poetic language from an artistic mind. Now, as the formerly dead canary flitted around my living room, I wasn't so sure. With trembling hands, I picked up the manuscript again. I had only played the first measure, a haunting sequence unlike anything in my grandfather's published work. The notation itself seemed conventional, but the structure of the harmonies followed patterns I'd never encountered before. My phone rang, startling me. It was Dean Hargrove from the university. "Eleanor, have you been contacted by anyone from Blackbridge Institute about your grandfather's work?" "No," I replied, watching the canary settle on my bookshelf. "Why?" "A man was in my office this morning, very insistent about meeting you. When I declined to provide your contact information, he implied certain funding opportunities for the department might depend on your cooperation." "Did he leave a name?" "Dr. Everett Chambers. Said he's the research director at Blackbridge." "Eleanor." The dean hesitated. "He knew about a package you received from Vienna. Said it was mistakenly sent to you and contains sensitive intellectual property belonging to his organization." My blood ran cold. The package had arrived only yesterday, addressed specifically to me. How could anyone know about it already? "I've never heard of Blackbridge Institute," I said carefully. "Neither had I, but they appear legitimate on paper. Private research facility, very well funded. They focus on unusual acoustic phenomena from what I could gather." After ending the call, I did a quick search for Blackbridge Institute. Their website was polished but vague, describing pioneering research into unexplored properties of sound and resonance. I found reference to Dr. Chambers, an impressive CV listing classified government work before joining Blackbridge 10 years ago. What I couldn't find was any historical connection to my grandfather or his work. The canary continued to sing, a complex melody that seemed to mirror portions of the manuscript I hadn't yet played. I made a decision and called my colleague, Professor Martin Chen from the physics department. "I need your help with something unusual," I told him, "and I need your discretion." When Martin arrived an hour later, he stared in disbelief at the canary. "You're certain this bird was taxidermied?" "For 12 years, I confirmed. It was my mother's. I kept it after she died." Martin, ever the scientist, took photographs and even managed to collect a small feather that had fallen onto the coffee table. "And you believe playing this music somehow reanimated it?" I demonstrated, playing just the first measure again. The canary, which had been quietly perched on the curtain rod, suddenly began to sing more vigorously, its song now interwoven with harmonics that complemented what I had played. Martin adjusted his glasses. "That's not possible." "It's happening." I pointed to the manuscript. My grandfather believed music could affect reality at a fundamental level. Everyone thought he was brilliant but delusional. What if he was right? Martin carefully examined the notation. "These structures, they're almost like wave function equations. If sound could somehow influence quantum states." He shook his head. "I need to run some analysis. Before he could elaborate, there was a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw a tall man in an impeccable suit, flanked by two others in more casual attire. Something about their posture suggested they weren't academics. "Dr. Walsh," the suited man called through the door. "I'm Everett Chambers from Blackridge Institute. I believe you have something that belongs to us." Martin and I exchanged glances. I grabbed the manuscript, my laptop, and a few essentials, shoving them into my bag while Martin scooped the canary into his jacket pocket. We slipped out through the back door just as I heard the distinct sound of a key turning in my front lock. A key I hadn't provided. Martin drove us to his lab on campus. It was Friday evening and the science building was nearly deserted. "How will they have a key to your home?" Martin asked as we hurried through the quiet corridors. "They wouldn't," I replied. "Not legally." In Martin's lab, we placed the canary in a glass terrarium borrowed from the biology department. It showed no signs of distress, hopping about and occasionally singing phrases that corresponded eerily to segments of the unplayed symphony. Martin ran preliminary tests on the feather using equipment I didn't recognize, occasionally muttering technical terms that meant nothing to me. Finally, he turned to me with an expression of scientific awe. "This feather shows quantum entanglement patterns that shouldn't be possible in biological systems. It's as if," he struggled for words, "it's as if the molecular structure is resonating between different states of being." "What does that mean in plain English?" "It means your grandfather may have discovered how to use specific harmonic patterns to influence matter at the quantum level." He pointed to the bird. "That creature exists in a sustained superposition. It's both living and not living simultaneously." Before I could process this, my phone rang, an unknown number. "Dr. Walsh," came a smooth voice when I answered. "This is Everett Chambers. I think we got off on the wrong foot earlier by breaking into my home. A misunderstanding. Our security team is occasionally overzealous." "What do you want, Dr. Chambers?" "The same thing you do to understand your grandfather's work. Julian Walsh was one of us, Dr. Walsh, a Blackridge researcher. The manuscript you received was the result of years of classified research, and it's incomplete without our contextual data. If that were true, why was it hidden in Vienna for almost 50 years? A pause. Your grandfather had concerns about potential applications of his discovery. He attempted to withdraw from the project. We've spent decades trying to reconstruct his work. And now you want me to just hand it over. I want to offer you a position at Blackridge. Full access to our research, generous compensation, and the chance to complete what your grandfather started. All we ask is that you bring the manuscript and any results you've already observed." The canary sang a warning trill that raised the hair on my neck. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course. Though I should mention, your university receives significant funding through foundations we influence. It would be unfortunate if budget cuts affected your department next year." After disconnecting, I relayed the conversation to Martin. "They're not just going to let this go," he said grimly. "Whatever your grandfather discovered, they've been searching for it for decades." I spread the manuscript across Martin's desk. "Then we need to understand what it does before they find us." We worked through the night, Martin analyzing the mathematical relationships in the composition while I worked on interpreting my grandfather's notations. The margins contained cryptic comments. "Threshold reached at measure 49, and reality barrier thinnest at resolving cadence." By morning, Martin had created a computer model of the harmonic structures. "If I'm right," he said, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion, "this composition gradually builds a pattern of resonance that could theoretically affect the quantum probability field of anything exposed to it." Meaning it could reshape reality on a fundamental level, at least locally within the sound's range. The implications were staggering. Is that even possible? According to conventional physics, absolutely not. But then again, he nodded toward the canary, now sleeping peacefully in its temporary home. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your grandfather tried to destroy his work because he understood the danger. You should do the same. Meet me at St. Mark's Cathedral, noon today. Come alone. A friend of Julian's." I showed Martin the message. "Could be a trap," he warned. "Or it could be answers." I gathered the manuscript. "I'll go. You continue the analysis here." St. Mark's was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few tourists admiring the stained glass and a white-haired man sitting in the last pew. As I approached, he didn't look up. "Julian was right to fear what he discovered," the man said without preamble. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Who are you? Anton Novak. I worked alongside your grandfather at Blackridge when it had a different name. His accent was faintly Eastern European. We were researching weaponized acoustics, ways to use sound to disrupt enemy communications, disabled equipment. Julian took the research in an unexpected direction. The transcendental properties of harmonics, I quoted. Anton nodded. He discovered certain harmonic combinations could create what he called resonance tunnels between realities. Places where the barriers between possible worlds grow thin enough to cross. That's impossible. So was quantum mechanics once. He finally looked at me, his eyes sharp despite his age. The military applications were immediately obvious. Imagine soldiers who could step through sound barriers into positions behind enemy lines, or weapons that could be shifted into a target location from another reality. And my grandfather objected. Julian discovered something worse than weapons. He found that sustained resonance could actually merge realities, bringing elements from one world permanently into another. Anton lowered his voice. The manuscript you have isn't just music, Dr. Walsh. It's a key that opens doors to places we don't understand and cannot control. If it's so dangerous, why did my grandfather preserve it rather than destroy it? Because knowledge, once discovered, cannot be undiscovered. He believed humanity would eventually find this doorway again. The manuscript contains not just the formula to open the door, but warnings about what lies beyond it. Anton checked his watch nervously. Blackbridge never understood the full scope. They've been working from fragments, trying to reconstruct Julian's breakthrough. Now you've delivered the missing piece. What should I do? Complete the work. His answer surprised me. Finish Julian's composition as he intended, not as a weapon, but as a warning. The final movement contains fail-safes, harmonic structures designed to close the doorways permanently. He pressed a small notebook into my hands. Julian gave me this before he disappeared. It contains his notes on the final movement, the part missing from the manuscript you received. Before I could ask more questions, Anton stiffened, looking toward the cathedral entrance. They found us. Go out through the side chapel. I glimpsed men in dark suits entering the cathedral as I slipped away through a service door, clutching both the manuscript and the notebook. When I returned to Martin's lab, I found the door ajar and equipment scattered across the floor. Martin sat on a stool, looking dazed, a bruise forming on his cheek. The terrarium lay shattered, the canary gone. Chambers, he said before I could ask. 3 men. They took our preliminary data and the bird. I tried to stop them, he gestured to his face. Did they say anything? Only that you join them soon enough, voluntarily or not. Eleanor, the analysis I completed before they arrived, the harmonic patterns in that composition could theoretically tear a hole in space-time if amplified correctly. I showed him Anton's notebook. Then we need to complete it. The final movement apparently contains counter-harmonics that can close those tears permanently. Martin scanned the new material. These are brilliant. It's like an acoustic vaccine, triggers the same quantum effects, but in a pattern that stabilizes rather than disrupts. Can we implement it without the original manuscript they took? I have the digital scans. We'll need an acoustically perfect space for maximum effect and instruments capable of producing the exact frequency relationships. I knew just the place. The university's concert hall, renovated last year with acoustic perfection as the primary goal. As we gathered what we needed, my phone rang, Chambers again. Your colleague was most helpful, he said without preamble. We now have enough to proceed, though your expertise would still be valuable. Last chance to join us voluntarily, Dr. Walsh. Where are you taking this research, Chambers? Do you even understand what you're meddling with? Better than you might think. Your grandfather glimpsed the possibility of rewriting reality itself. Imagine the applications, pulling resources from parallel worlds, accessing technologies beyond our development, even altering historical outcomes. At what cost? Progress always has a price. When are you attempting to implement the formula? He hesitated, then apparently decided there was no harm in telling me. Tonight, midnight, we've constructed an acoustic chamber specifically for this purpose. Once we observe the initial results, we'll move to larger applications. After disconnecting, I turned to Martin. We have until midnight to implement the failsafe. The university concert hall was empty, the weekend schedule clear. Martin set up recording equipment while I arranged the necessary instruments, primarily crystal singing bowls, tuning forks, and a perfectly maintained grand piano. "We'll need to perform the entire composition," Martin explained, "including the parts Chambers has. The countermeasures only work in the context of the complete harmonic sequence. And if we succeed, according to these notes, any doorways opened by the original composition should seal permanently, and the harmonic pattern will be broken so it can never be replicated." As we prepared, strange phenomena began to manifest around us. The air seemed to thicken in certain spots, light bending around invisible contours. Small objects, pencils, paper clips, occasionally rose and hovered before falling again. "They've started," Martin said, checking his instruments. "They're already generating a preliminary harmonic field." I began to play, following my grandfather's composition precisely. Martin joined with the tuning forks at designated intervals, creating overlapping harmonic patterns that made the air vibrate visibly. As we reached measure 49, the threshold my grandfather had noted, the grand piano began to play itself, adding notes I wasn't touching. Around us, the air split into visible layers, like looking through shattered glass at multiple versions of the same room. Through one of these fractures, I saw another version of the concert hall, similar but different. The seats were red instead of blue, the stage arrangement slightly altered. Through another, I glimpsed what appeared to be the same space but abandoned, dust-covered, and decaying. "Quantum windows," Martin gasped, still striking tuning forks in precise sequence. "We're seeing parallel realities where different choices were made." As the composition progressed, the windows grew larger. In one, I glimpsed movement, figures that looked human but moved wrong, their proportions subtly distorted. They seemed to notice us, turning toward our reality with expressions of hungry interest. "Keep playing," Martin urged. "We're approaching the failsafe sequence." My fingers flew across the keys as I integrated Anton's notations, creating counter-harmonies designed to collapse the resonance tunnels. The figures in the parallel reality pressed against the thinning barrier, their features becoming clearer, twisted versions of human faces, eyes too large, mouths too wide. One reached through, its elongated fingers stretching into our reality, grasping toward me. The air where it penetrated shimmered and sparked. I launched into the final movement, a complex sequence of harmonically opposed patterns. The effect was immediate. The quantum windows began to contract, the reaching figure jerked backward as if pulled by an invisible force. The piano keys became hot under my fingers, the strings vibrating so intensely I feared they might snap. Martin's tuning forks glowed with heat, but he continued striking them in sequence. In my mind, I heard my grandfather's voice, though I'd never actually heard it in life. "The doorway goes both ways, Eleanor. Complete the sequence." With a final thunderous chord that seemed to draw power from the very air around us, the windows to other realities collapsed completely. The reaching figure was violently pulled back, its inhuman shriek fading as the barrier between worlds sealed itself. The piano strings finally snapped, whipping through the air as the instrument fell silent. Martin's tuning forks shattered simultaneously, their fragments scattering across the stage. As the last echoes faded, we found ourselves in an ordinary concert hall once more. My grandfather's manuscript began to disintegrate in my hands, the pages turning to dust as if they had been waiting decades to finally fulfill their purpose. All that remained was Anton's notebook, the failsafe, the protection against doors that should never be opened again. Later that night, we learned that Blackbridge's facility had experienced a catastrophic acoustic anomaly. Their research was destroyed, their instruments rendered useless, and Dr. Chambers was found babbling about the things that almost came through. The canary had disappeared entirely, perhaps returning to whatever state of existence it truly belonged in. My grandfather hadn't been mad after all. He had discovered the music that could reshape reality itself, and had sacrificed everything to ensure it would never be misused. In completing his unfinished symphony, I hadn't just closed doors between worlds, I had finally brought his life's work to its true resolution.